So as we've talked about on the channel, and one of the most polarizing topics in Diablo 4 today is the legendary drops. Now, it was increased in the previous betas and is since decreased down to normal. And a lot of people really enjoy this. There's also a lot of people that really don't. And I want to talk about why this is an absolutely great change and potentially had saved a lot of the annoyances or potentially unfun mechanics that a lot of people would experience that they may not even realize. Now, the first consideration that we really have to address is the fact that both betas had a maximum level of 20 and 25 respectively. This is huge because the first 10 levels in both betas were really not dropping any sort of legendary items, unless you might have had a treasure goblin show up. As soon as you reached around level 11 or 12 in level 25 beta, which I did on 5 different characters, so that usually was the case, unless, as I said, you had a treasure goblin, you started to drop legendaries. In the second iteration of the beta, honestly, around level 19 to 20 is when I dropped my first legendary item, and after that, it was roughly every hour or hour and a half, typically, on average, unless you did some nasty farming methods like core dragon farming, which wasn't really and isn't really going to be applicable to the live game. But this is one thing to consider, which is we have so many levels to go, and as we increase in levels, it seems to be that the drops also increase with you, at least in terms of the rarity and how common they are. This is very common in any game in the Diablo series. If you increase the difficulty or if you increase your level, you typically raise the quality of items that you're dropping, and it seems that Diablo 4 is no different. So when we consider the drops, we first have to consider that we only experienced the first essentially 3 to 4 hours of gameplay of the campaign and of the leveling. We have no idea how this will scale past this. Now that applies to the first 50 levels or so while you're going through the campaign, but as soon as you get through the campaign, you're going to unlock World Tier 3 and then eventually World Tier 4. During the betas, we were only allowed for World Tier 1 and 2 because we could not beat the campaign. When we get to World Tier 3, we have so many different things that we unlock, specifically sacred items and unique items that are going to be able to be dropped at that moment, which in turn will be increasing our legendary gains due to us potentially fulfilling those requirements and then allowing those unique items to drop, which will give you guaranteed stats. Not only that, but then World Tier 4 could come around, and again, we have unique items that can drop, potentially more, and ancestral items or ancestral unique items that can drop as well, which are going to be massive boons to your account, as well as just in general giving you more potential for legendary drops. On top of that, one of the best ways to acquire legendary items was through the world boss. In fact, I acquired probably around 80% of my legendaries through just multiple runs of Ashava in the betas. But during the live game, there are going to be more world events available and potentially region-wide, things like potentially caravan escorts or more world bosses that we're going to be able to interact with that may drop more high-quality legendary items that isn't necessarily locked behind a 3-hour time gate. Now, most of them probably will be time-gated, but it won't necessarily be like every 3 hours. You could have like, well, oh, in 2 hours, I'm going to go to this boss. In another hour, I'm going to go to this boss. In 30 minutes, I'm going to go to this boss. And as you start to level up and get access to all the different areas, you can get a bunch of legendary items because they scale to your level a lot of the time. So very prominent potential for huge events to give you more loot. Add to that, we have the Helltide Zones, which are going to be open world pieces of content that we're going to unlock at level 50. These Helltide Zones are specifically meant to target farm legendary items in specific slots, which will be actually useful now that we won't have every legendary aspect available to us when we actually reach level 50. Because if we had those increased drops, we might have even had all the legendary aspects that we needed, although there is an RNG factor. But after 40 hours of gameplay, I wouldn't see any reason as to not having most of your aspects as a specific class. This is probably would have happened had we increased the drops back to the beta amount. Lastly, there's the endgame nightmare dungeons to consider, which are meant to grind higher level gear, higher level rewards, and higher level potential XP with the nightmare sigil system. And who knows how much, if we can increase that to potentially previous beta rates with certain sigils. Maybe those sigils offer a reward of additional legendaries or increased legendaries. We are not 100% sure on that yet, and this could absolutely be a massive game changer. And the reason I decided to talk about all of this is specifically for the fact that there are so many legendary drop boosts that we haven't even touched. Because I see a lot of people talking about, oh, there's just not enough legendaries, and you know, this is just not necessarily going to be good as we get into the game. There's so many different bonuses that we have not considered. Now, granted, there is one criticism that I could hear and see some reason behind, and that is if you are a casual player and you only plan on playing for the early levels anyways, and you're not going to get some legendary items as frequently. But I don't think that this game is specifically targeting those people that are only doing under 30-40 hours within a season, or even if you are going to do 30-40 hours and only can do that within a season, perhaps Eternal Realm is better for you so you can actually access these systems. But this is a pretty big thing, and I would be worried about the game a little bit, honestly, after I reconsidered and thought about it after we got the drop rate kind of reduction after it was boosted. This is a big step in the right direction, and I'm absolutely loving it. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about it here because I am just getting more and more excited. The more I think about a lot of the changes that they made, the more I am like, wow, that was such a good idea that I hadn't really considered, because I hadn't considered getting boosted drop rates beforehand, and these new drop rates seem to be much more in line with how I felt in terms of what I wanted in my progression path. But something to talk about. I'll have more build guides coming out for the early leveling process for launch, as well as all things that you might need to know for launch. So be sure to sub if that interests you guys, and let me know what you think about this. I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about, so I decided to do so. See you tomorrow.